It sparked international outrage and led to court action against the Trump administration. Pictures of immigrant children being taken from their parents as they enter the US. But away from the headlines, there are many other stories of families being separated every day.
I see separations in both administrations. Republicans and Democrats are doing the same thing in different times, in different ways, but at the end, everything means separation of the family.
On this show, we'll be focusing on the American children whose parents face deportation. Here in New York, The Square starts now. Welcome to Times Square, I'm Sally Ihan. On this show, we'll be discussing the issue of immigrant families in the United States who face separation. We'll be asking whether the immigration system needs reform and talking about the social and economic consequences of deporting immigrants who work in the labour sector. And we want to hear your opinions. You can send us your questions and comments on Twitter and Facebook at TRT World and be part of the conversation. Now, there was a huge amount of controversy over President Donald Trump's policy to take children from their parents after illegally entering the US. But what about families who have been in the US for many years and whose children are citizens? When illegal immigrants face deportation, their children are taken into care by US authorities. And once a parent is deported, it becomes very difficult for the family to ever be reunited. I travelled to Miami to meet Nora Sandigo. She describes herself as a guardian of immigrant orphans and is currently legally responsible for over 1,000 children. There are many shades of America in Miami. The Hispanic population has helped to transform what was once a sleepy southern city to a bustling metropolis. And as people have settled here, families have grown. But staying together as a family isn't something everyone here takes for granted. I've come to meet Nora. She's a guardian to over 1,000 children, all of whom have parents who are not legally living in the United States.
Everyone's come to me and say, "Oh, Norita, you sure that if something happened to my dad or to my mom, you will help me?" Because sometimes they said, "Oh, I can't sleep well because I had bad dreams, thinking that something could happen to my father and mother." And sometimes they said that they are in school and they cannot focus on their education. It is so painful.
You said that the immigration system is broken. What needs to change to help these kids?
The only way that we have to fix the broken immigration system is to make the new legislation that legalize the immigrant community who live here for so long, who pay taxes, who speak English, and who are good abiding people.
Nora has been acting as legal guardian for over 20 years. Today she's delivering a mattress to one of the families. Maria, her husband Francisco, and their 4 children are staying in a motorhome. So they're going to move in here from upstairs. Okay. They pay $200 in rent and they're paid a small wage to farm the land on the property.
My motorhome has broken down even more since we moved to this new place, and we realized that it is totally in bad condition.
Miami has always been influenced by immigrants coming to live here. The city went from a frontier village to seeing rapid growth in population and the economy. In the 1960s, the Cuban community started to come, followed by waves of immigrants from other Latin American countries. And as people migrated to Miami, so did businesses.
We know that immigrants, for example, contribute upwards of $453 million toward GDP for the state of Florida.
Many of the parents of these American children work in agriculture south of Miami. They try to find labour each day and avoid the authorities as much as they can. The fear they have is often more about the fate of their children.
Pues mi estatus es legal aquí porque pues uno no sabe, ¿verdad?
They explained to me what happens with the children if they deport me. They would be given up for adoption. Thank God I knew Nora and gave her guardianship so that she will take care of them while I would work on my case. She would take charge and is like the second mother, and I know that with her they'll be well taken care of.
People in America don't want to see children separated from their parents, but there doesn't seem to be a simple solution to the problem under the current system. And while there is sympathy, many don't want undocumented immigrants coming to the United States. What about the families where the children are legal citizens of the US, but their parents are undocumented? Do you think that those parents should be deported?
It's a hard question. You know, with my heart, I don't think so, but if they broke the law, it's like don't send them to jails because they stole, because they have a child. You know, it's a matter of laws.
So what should happen to those parents?
I don't know. They should maybe go back and redo the proper paperwork and then come back. We're not a mean nation. The contrary. I never see anybody wanting to leave America. Everybody wants to come to America. There must be something to it. And our laws are pretty fair, but we have laws that it seems that nobody cares about laws, because in what country can millions of people come in and walk in and you don't know who they are and they can be whatever, they can change their name, they don't bring papers, you don't know who they are.
I've come to meet a group of activists that campaign against ICE. Lily has been here for over 20 years. Her husband Walter was deported back to Peru earlier this year. He left behind 2 children. So Roxana, do you miss your daddy? Yeah? Yeah. How often do you talk to him?
I don't know.
Obtaining a work visa for the United States is difficult unless someone falls into the highly skilled labour category. And campaigners say that it's the lack of a clear path to entering the US that is a fundamental problem.
The rigid borders are the cause of people staying here. Many people want to come here, work, and they want to come back. And so it is because of this rigidity and draconianism that we have this type of thing. So like something sensible like expanding DACA as a national policy, something sensible as like normal work visas that allows normal transit. And everybody that you would ask here, if you're a migrant, you come to this country, you miss your culture, you miss your family. Everybody wants to go back, but you choose not to because of these draconian laws and very strict borders.
And for Nora, the long history of administrations governing these borders has made little difference to the increasing number of children she has in her care. You were talking before about how people look at Trump as being the problem. When he was separating families, did you find that difficult given the work you do? When he was taking children from their parents?
Well, the actual administration is doing the same thing that the other administration did in the past, but the new administration is giving more expectation, negative expectation in the community because it's the verbal politic of the new administration that is giving more problems to us.
But the Obama administration didn't separate families. He detained them, but he didn't separate families.
Oh yes, the Obama administration separated a lot of families. Even in our list, in our database, we have hundreds of children that were separated during the Obama administration just because they deported to the parents and their children who are American citizens are here alone without father or mother. It happened the same thing.
Yeah, but I suppose the difference is that the families come together with the intention to stay together and the administration is separating them, taking the children away from the parents.
Yes, but it's the same thing. They came, the difference is that the new administration is deporting more people that are coming recently. The last administration deported more people that were here for so long. Even some people that were here for 18 20 years, and they were deported, and their children are here, American citizens, students, but they are alone without father and mother. And for me, that means separation, total separation. They disrupt the family.
They're still alone, essentially.
Yes.
When Donald Trump unveiled his family separation policy last year, it caught the media's attention and there was widespread anger. After all, images of crying children being separated from their families at the border was never going to fly under the radar. But in talking to Nora and her mixed status families, it's clear that these are the stories that are going unnoticed. Every day there are American children that are at risk of being separated from their undocumented parents. And this is not down to Donald Trump's immigration policy. This is a consequence of a system that's been separating families for centuries. Let's bring in my guest with me, Michael Cutler. He's a retired special agent and spent 30 years as an immigration inspector. And Daniel Nyayonks, who is a professor and international migration researcher with the United Nations. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, firstly, if I could just get your reactions to that film here. It's a highly complex issue. Is the system broken, Michael?
No.
Expand?
It's not broken because I believe that the people at the top of the economic food chain want exactly what we're getting. It has become a delivery system, the immigration system has, that delivers an unlimited supply of cheap, exploitable labor. And believe me, there's no compassion in exploitation. It delivers an unlimited supply of foreign tourists, foreign students, for the immigration lawyers in Congress and elsewhere, the politicians, an unlimited supply of clientele for the law firms. We've never really enforced the law in a way that deters illegal immigration. We have 6,000 ICE agents for the entire country. ICE, by its own definition, was designed to split immigration off and make it untenable. Customs has nothing to do with immigration. We've always been a welcoming country. I'm first-generation American. I'm a big fan of lawful immigration. But the immigration system, first and foremost, must accomplish a couple of things, and the laws do that. Protect America's national security, public safety, public health, and the jobs and wages of American workers.
Daniel, what do you say to that?
I would say our current immigration system and many parts of it are broken. There's lots of challenges that we should address, and there's a lot of wrong ways this system is going right now. What I would say that what our current debate is focusing on is more red herrings by some politicians who really want to gain votes and power, and not really a policy issue. This focus on security, on deterring, on fearing that an immense flood of people is just waiting to come in and overcrowd us. That's highly unlikely. That's not what we're seeing right now.
Let's just pause for a moment here. I want to bring in Ophelia Calderon. She's an immigration lawyer who concentrates on family, naturalisation and asylum cases. Let's hear what she says about the social impact of these family separations.
These children who have lived nowhere but the United States, are U.S. citizens, are suddenly adrift. Families are together for a reason. And so I think there's long-term damage to these kids in particular. They don't have the support. These are not children that are necessarily going to be able to move past obstacles, continue on going to college. I mean, they don't have the funds, they don't have the support for that. I think what happens is they end up in a position of reverting to a place where they just need to survive. And sadly, they are American citizens who have been deprived of their families. So I think there's real long-term damage that we do to the children of undocumented people when we deport them.
Okay, so I'd like to get a little bit of a reaction to that. Obviously, there's a lot of political and economic issues we can discuss here, but Daniel, do you think that there's enough thought behind the personal impact on these kids?
We've seen children, very small children, that toddlers who are separated from their parents, and not just for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, but for long term. They have been in these detention center-like facilities. So obviously, you don't have to be a social psychologist to know that that is really bad for the development of these children. And there are potentials of having long-term negative impacts. This is not about the parents or the families. It is about an additional idea about having a really strong policy that deters people elsewhere. So it's a third-party effect that we're intending, which again is actually not working, but it has really negative impacts for the people involved.
Michael, one of the points that Nora made in the film, talking to me off camera as well, was that the US has a responsibility here to these American children, these American citizens. In the Constitution, their welfare is the US responsibility, which involves the parents' welfare too. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, it's interesting that we allow illegal aliens to have children in the United States and we give them citizenship. There's been controversy about if the 14th Amendment really was designed for that purpose. Those children can go home with their parents. They wouldn't be deported, but most of those children are dual nationals, so they have the opportunity to go back to the native country of the parents if the parents have to leave.
But they're usually leaving countries that they probably don't want to go back to, whether it's for economic reasons or whether it's they'd be in danger.
Sure, but here's the problem. If you look at wage suppression, when we bring in lots of foreign workers, in fact, MIT and I believe it was Harvard has estimated that the number of illegals are actually double what we're hearing. I think it's even greater than that because sanctuary cities have a don't ask, don't tell policy. So the suppression of wages, the amount of remittances, the congressional
Let's talk about
budget
economy
office.
in a minute. Let's just stick to the social aspect here.
All right.
What kind of impact would this experience have on a child?
Well, it's not a good experience for them. Absolutely, it's detrimental, and I'm not going to disagree with that. But it shouldn't have happened in the first place. Those children, when they turn 21, will have the absolute right to petition to have their parents brought to the United States as lawful immigrants. They're given the unflattering term of anchor babies. So the idea is that people know that if they have a child in the United States and they're young when they have the children, if they can wait the 21 years, that child will ultimately provide them with a pathway to a green card in the United States. And I think that should stop.
Daniel, what do you say to that?
Well, as far as I know, the undocumented immigrants in this country are not more likely to have children than undocumented than people in their countries of origin. So to think that they only have children because they want to have a theoretical pathway in 25 or 30 years to have citizenship.
21 years.
Well, and then it takes time to process, etc.
But they're here.
I think also
I think that's highly unlikely, and that's a strategic.
I've heard this from many people I arrested, though. I hate to disagree with you. Where they said to me, I have a child, and that child is going to get me my residency. My sense was that many of them really had that expectation that this gives me that toehold. And so the only solution to counteract what you're saying is to just let the whole world come here, let them stay forever. You can't do that.
So what about the economic consequences of deporting these migrants? I want to bring in our immigration expert, Ophelia Cauldron, again.
I think the United States economy is incredibly dependent on these workers. Americans really need to be better about being honest about our lifestyles and about the things that we do. I mean, every day we are interacting with some product or some service that is the result, is the end product of some work that was done by an undocumented alien. And that's the truth. I mean, every time you walk into a restaurant and a clean dish is put in front of you, you need to think about how that dish got clean. Because let me tell you something, it was some guy named Juan. Okay, that's the reality. When you tell me that these illegal immigrants are stealing our jobs, I just don't believe you. Like, I know this isn't the case because no one is displacing my job, no one is displacing your job. I mean, we also have a population issue in this country, and we see in other countries how that can affect your long-term outlook, right? You see in certain countries, like Japan, for example, where they have low birth rates and high elderly rates. This is a situation that we also have.
Okay, now, Michael, obviously listening to Ophelia there, she's making a point about the fact that this country runs on immigrants in some ways. Do you think that we underestimate the value of immigrants in this country?
No, and by the way, we're not talking about immigrants. We admit 1 million plus every year. We're talking about people who are illegally present. If you evade the inspections process, we don't know if you're criminals, we don't know if they're terrorists, we don't know if they have dangerous communicable diseases. That's all contained in Title 8 United States Code Section 1182, the grounds for exclusion. The idea of people working in kitchens of restaurants, well, we don't know if they might have dangerous communicable diseases, gives me great cause for pause.
Some of the conversations I was having in Miami with people was that, yes, these people could steal our jobs, but also, on the other hand, Nora and some of the families were saying, we do the jobs that people don't want to do. We farm the land.
We have American
Daniel,
migrant
what do you say to
too.
that?
Well, there is a lot of evidence, a lot of studies done by the US government, done by the National Academy of Science, done by a lot of really good researchers on the impact of different kinds of immigration inflows on the US economy. And the vast, vast majority really is very clear. Any type of immigration, regular, irregular, refugees, economic migrants, has positive impacts for the economy. And there's one theory that says if you have more people coming in, they compete with local workers, which means their wages go down or the unemployment rises. That is basically not the case. Mostly, we see no impact on wages. Sometimes we see an increase of wages, where incoming workers are actually complementary to local workers. And sometimes, and I agree with Michael there, sometimes we see small-scale decreases in the wages. With labor laws, with labor enforcement, with skilling perspectives, there are many ways that have nothing to do with immigration control, deportations, that we can actually address this.
Do you agree, Michael?
Well, there's got to be a consequence for violating the law. We have a problem with drunk driving. We didn't throw up our hands and say, well, there's too many people who drive drunk, we can't do anything about it, or text while driving. We lowered the acceptable blood alcohol level and implemented severe punishment. We'll take your car, we'll put you in jail, we'll seize whatever. The problem here is that many of the people who come and work illegally or work temporarily do so to send money home. We're losing hundreds of billions of dollars a year in remittances when you look at the multiplier effect, and when you look at wage suppression, and when you look at Americans who lose their jobs to foreign workers, whether it's legal or illegal.
Right, perfect point then to bring in our next segment. I want to bring in the view of Ophelia Calderon one more time and hear from her on the issues of visas and the US immigration system in general.
The current immigration system with respect to the numbers and the visas is something that was written in the 50s, in the mid-50s. We are clearly in 2019, and that system does not reflect our economy. When we talk about unskilled workers or non-professional jobs, there aren't any visas. There's the H-2B visa, which has been in the news a lot lately because, as you know, the Mar-a-Lago resort uses that quite a bit. And there aren't enough for that either, right? And there are companies that are constantly asking for extensions and asking for more visas. But then we have to ask ourselves, well, then what does that mean? It means that we need these visas. And those are seasonal in nature. This doesn't reflect all of the other jobs that I just told you about, which are not seasonal in nature. It's not seasonal to wash dishes. I don't think that this is actually a partisan issue. I mean, in my experience in the last 15, 17 years, having spoken to Republican lawmakers and Democratic lawmakers, Republican lawmakers are just as aware as Democratic lawmakers are that immigration is something that's positive for this country and that legal immigration requires that we have visas, non-immigrant and immigrant, that are available to allow our economy to function.
Okay, let's get some reaction from you, Daniel, on that. A lot of people I spoke to in Miami said, well, you know, they should go back to where they came from and apply to come the legal way. But are there enough possibilities and opportunities for people to come the legal way?
I don't think so. I think at the scale that we are in this economy needing immigrant labor at different skill levels, and that they're really at the lowest skill level to any medium skill level to the highest skill level, we do not have the systems in place to actually recruit and let people in. Overall, I think one could devise a system that is much more liberal, that is gives much more opportunities for people to come here with regular visas. But right now, we're not even close there.
Michael, one of the things that Nora did say to me is that part of the reason why she does the work she does is that she wants to keep these kids out of the foster system because the foster system is also broken. So aren't these children being protected by at least keeping their parents legally here as well?
Well, no, that wouldn't protect the parents. It would just create more incentives for more people to come here. If you want to get to the root cause, we need to stop using America as a safety valve for the third world. And this leads to exploitation. It's not a good situation.
One of the comments that the activists made at the end of that film there, which I thought was interesting, was what about if we had a border, a bit like the EU, where we had a situation where migrants could come and go, they could work for a little while and then go back, rather than such a hard border where it was such a draconian style way of living. Is this a possibility? Do you see a future where America can have a little bit more of an open border? What is the solution?
So I think actually if Mexico and the US and other countries in the Western Hemisphere actually had more open border policies, we would not see millions and millions and millions of people flooding the United States. That's just not how people work. A lot of people would maybe come, they would go back, and one little footnote, even right now, about the same number of irregular immigrants come into the United States as are leaving the United States every year. So we have 300 to 400,000 irregular immigrants going back to their countries of origin every year. So the idea that everyone is just coming because America is the holy land everybody wants to be is not really backed up by facts.
I think what's difficult about this discussion is obviously there's a huge economic and political impact, but
Absolutely.
We're talking about human stories here. I mean, we're talking about people fleeing violence and wanting to find a safer and a better life.
It's not as clear-cut as you would like to make it sound, I have to tell you. Compassion, first and foremost, needs to apply to the citizens of its own country. Okay. You don't give money to charity when your own children are going to bed hungry at night.
All right, I think we'll have to finish there. It's a very complex issue and I really appreciate both of your comments here. That's all we have time for, unfortunately, today. I'd like to thank my two guests, Michael Cutler and Daniel Nayox, for coming on. We'd love to hear from our audience too, so you can send us your thoughts on all the topics we've discussed in today's show on Twitter and on Facebook at TRT World, and let us know what you think. Thanks to the team here in New York, and please join me next time on The Square.